My first book is more a reflection of my childhood and how I grew up and lived in Iraq. It basically, the name Perception Wars, Iraq from the Outside In, was established because I was born in the States, and then I left the States when I was 6 years old, and I went to Iraq. So for all practical purposes, I was already conditioned to think a certain way within the American culture. I basically had no intention of writing this book. It was never in my thinking at all. It was off my radar, so to speak. But as I was invited to different places, universities, colleges, workshops, to give a presentation about my background and how I grew up, very normally I'd have at least 2 or 3 people coming up to me saying, you know, you should be writing a book about this. Are you sure you haven't written anything about it? So after hearing this for about a couple of years, I said, you know what, why don't I go ahead and write this? So before I knew it, I was writing the outline for it, and then suddenly I started writing about it. And I actually started in 2008, and actually it was a little bit sooner than that. 2008 is when it was published, but I started about maybe 3-4 years earlier. It took me a little while because as soon as I was done writing the first draft, I'd look at it, I said, no, this is stuff I can't leave in here. Or no, I can't write about this, because you know, you're writing about some very sensitive experiences that you had when you were growing up in Iraq, and you're always concerned that you might get a negative reaction from relatives, from people. And then I reached a point where I said, you know, am I going to tell the truth or not? And the title is Perceptions, which basically means that it's not the reality, but it's how I perceived, how I lived, how other people lived, and so on, how people perceive their environment, how people perceive the politics of the time. So that's the reason for the title, and that's how I pretty much approached it. It actually was very important, I realized, to get that writing completed because, to be honest with you, because of the struggles that I had to go through growing up in Iraq. It was like taking some weight off my back. Once I wrote it, it was quite therapeutic to get it all written down. And then, of course, as I was sharing some of this information with my sisters and my brother, they were actually surprised that there was some information there that they hadn't known about. And so when they started reading it, for them it brought back some memories that they had forgotten about, but they also became aware of some information that they had not known about, because one part of our painful growing up experiences was being in boarding schools a lot. And I guess the story more or less begins when I lose my mother 2 months after I was born, and that's how things begin to change, and we go through a series of events that really turns our lives upside down. We end up going to Lebanon, and then we end up going to Iraq, and that's where the story continues.